And when it comes to legal systems and institutions dealing with marine fisheries, both as a state and union subject, the small-scale fishery guidelines, together with the code of conduct, provides comprehensive guidance on revamping fisheries policies and legislation consistent with India's obligations under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the UN Fish Stocks Agreement. So both these agreements, India has either ratified or acceded to. So therefore, we are bound by these obligations. And to give a recent example, if you take the statement of intent of the National Policy on Marine Fisheries 2016, for example, it acknowledges this fact very clearly that there are obligations under the UNCLOS and UN Fish Stocks Agreement. And this intent of statement also recognizes blue revolution in marine fisheries should improve life and livelihoods of fishers and their families. So not only to increase production, as well as of women dependent on post-harvest activities. It supports the implementation of the small-scale fishery guidelines. It's a very welcome kind of an inclusion in the statement of intent that it supports the implementation of the SSF guidelines. It promotes an ecosystem approach to fisheries management, including participatory management and co-management. It discusses the need to combine science-based approaches to fisheries management with traditional knowledge of fishers, very innovative proposal. It brings up climate change impacts on fish species and their abundance, that this has to be addressed. It expresses concern about marine pollution and its impact on fish stocks. It encourages regional cooperation, so not only within India but also to work with neighboring countries. Regional cooperation for managing shared resources and shared ecosystems. It raises tenure rights issues in relation to mariculture. It talks about how the resources of the sea, there can be farming operations at sea with the active participation of fishing communities. And it talks about designated areas for traditional and artisanal fishing activities, communities in the sea. It also seeks revamping outdated marine fisheries legislation for regulating the territorial waters, and it recommends regulation of fisheries in the exclusive economic zone of India, consistent with India's international treaty obligations. So based on the SSF guidelines, so we think that additional elements can be also considered for the new policy on marine fisheries for the next 10 years. This policy is being developed for the next 10 years. This could include, for example, to recognize the social development issues such as tenure rights issues in relation to habitation, occupation. For example, how spatial planning can help to deal with the tenure rights issues of the traditional fishing communities, for example. Then education, literacy, health, sanitation, and interstate migration. These are additional elements which we can consider under national fisheries policy. And then we also need to look at the need to address conflicts, both within the fisheries, intrasectoral and intersectoral conflicts, large scale, small scale, or between fisheries and other sectors which are using the ocean space or the aquatic space. And then these conflicts within the internal waters. Internal waters are waters confined by the baseline, and then in the territorial waters and the exclusive economic zone. And then we can also consider adopting comprehensive climate change adaptation and mitigation measures. For example, adjustment measures to reduce the negative impacts of climate change on small-scale fisheries, introducing energy efficiency in the marine value chain, facilitating access to adaptation fund and new climate smart technologies. Under the UNFCCC, there are several proposals which we can also extend to the fishery sectors. Distribution of benefits from domestic and international fish trade, how they should go to, down the value chain to women and all others who are involved in it. Recognition of the importance of building capacity in the post-harvest sector to improve fish quality and to assist women to make use of trade opportunities, both domestic and international. So there is also a need to recognize gender equality as part of a national policy, because if you look at the guidelines, it has a chapter on gender, and this gender equality can be again a part of the national fisheries policy. Some of the positive elements of the 2004 comprehensive marine fishing policy may also be retained in the new policy, because we don't have to abandon the old policy altogether. Some of the elements can be retained. So, for example, A unified housing scheme for fishers to be implemented through a national agency is one such element in the previous fisheries policy, which was not really implemented. That can be reiterated in the new policy. And then it talks about adopting a hazard analysis and critical control approach to effluent discharge. Again, it's important to deal with pollution issues, and this can also be considered in the new policy. And again, it proposed developing a legislation to regulate discharge of industrial effluent into the sea, which again can be considered for retention in the new fisheries policy. So today we have with us a wide spectrum of distinguished participants, not only from the marine and inland fishing communities across India, but also from a cross-section of ministries, departments and agencies, both at the union and state level, dealing with human rights, rural development, decentralization and local governance, labor and employment, environment, forests, biodiversity, climate change, rural development, trade, tribal affairs, planning, finance, fisheries, etc. So their legislative powers are distributed across the union list, state list and the concurrent list. Fisheries, food processing, drinking water, poverty alleviation, etc. are also part of the powers, authority and responsibilities of Panchayat Raj under the 11th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So the workshop will help to engage in a much needed dialogue between small-scale fishers, fish workers, civil society organizations, NGOs, policymakers and other stakeholders to raise the profile of the small-scale fisheries subsector, keeping the above lists in mind. So we are trying to see from the Panchayat level to the national level, using international guidelines, to discuss how policies and legislation and schemes at various levels can benefit inland and marine fishing communities, especially based on these important set of guidelines developed by FAO in a very wider consultation process. Yeah. Thank you very much.